What's up, everybody? Welcome to 2025. Let's get it kicked off right. Talking about UFC 311. I've got my man Dean Thomas with me, as always. Appreciate you, Dean. Look at the nice background, looking fresh, clean, well lit.
Clean background, well lit, nice camera.
Yeah.
What is going on with me?
I don't know. You're turning over a new leaf. You did put something up on your Instagram that briefly alarmed me. It felt like a shot across the bow at me directly because it had something to do with like inflation rates and like I am not, my time is worth more this year than it was last year. I was like, well,
No,
shit, 'cause
I'm
I'm not
just,
paying anymore.
no, I'm charging suckers. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like suckers. Like I told you earlier, I don't do nothing for money. I do everything for love and for passion.
And
And
thank God.
when people love and have the amount of passion that I have, we can work all day. But if you just come in to try to BS around, I ain't got no time for you, and I'm gonna charge you extra.
There we go. I like that. I like that attitude. I like that attitude. Quick announcement for the viewers of this channel. You are going to start to see some new faces. The first of which will be Adam Cattrall. So we've got a new teammate on one-on-one. So don't be alarmed. I will continue to do all the things that I've already been doing. I know people were panicking, like we're not getting enough Laura Sanko. Right. They weren't. But just to put it out there, I'll be doing the same amount of stuff. Dean and I will still be doing our thing, but Adam will also be adding to the channel, doing a number of different things, interviews, breakdowns of the entire card, all sorts of things. I love Adam. He lives in the UK. Hopefully we'll get to team up in person whenever we get a chance to do that. So excited about that. And more faces, more things to come as well. Just not ready for to be announced yet, but big things happening, Dean. Big
Well,
things.
congratulations on the expansion.
Well, thank you.
You
Thank you.
deserve it, and I'm happy for you.
We're growing something here. We're growing. We're growing. Thanks to Bet365, we're growing.
I
Big
was growing something once too. I had to go to the doctor and get it cut off.
a polyp. Well, hopefully I'll be coming to you from a studio around June as well. So anyway, people are not here to talk about our plans. They're here to talk about UFC 311 and what an amazing main event we have. Obviously, these fights, I feel like we do at least need to address the fact these fights are taking place in and around Los Angeles. What a crazy time to be going to LA, and I feel very much. I would feel weird doing this show without acknowledging what's going on there right now and just how much devastation the people in LA have been dealing with over the past week with the fires. It's been absolutely heartbreaking and just crazy to watch.
Yeah, no doubt about that. But and I don't want to justify or speak for the UFC or anything like that, but we kind of need a distraction, right? At
Sure.
some level, I mean, there's a different way to look at this. It's not what we need. We can use some distraction
Yeah.
because all this negativity. I know people going through it right now, but we could use a little bit of a distraction, and why not do it with some fighting,
I agree. I agree.
right?
What an incredible fight to have for our first pay-per-view of 2025. The champion, the lightweight champion Islam Makhachev, taking on Arman Tsarukyan. There is a lot to talk about in this fight, and I will go over some stats at some point. But Dean, I guess I'll start off with you. Obviously, this is a rematch. If you know anything about this fight, you already know that. It was Arman Tsarukyan's first UFC fight. It was a fight he took on only 3 weeks' notice, and yet it was a pretty competitive affair. Can we take anything from that first fight, or is it a throwaway because it was so long ago?
I think the only thing we can take away from it is that it's going to be completely different. That's the one thing you can take away. I mean, just too many different factors. Like, think about this. Gordon Ryan got his black belt and it was beating lifelong black belts in 5 years. So there's a lot that can
That's
happen
actually
in
pretty crazy.
5 years.
Yeah.
A lot can happen in 5 years. So you have to look at it this way. Arman Tsarukyan was young. The one thing that we can take away from it is that he wasn't intimidated the first time. There's no need or reason to believe that he's going to be intimidated at all this time. He understands the assignment, and I think it's a completely different matchup. And if we didn't learn anything from last week, 5 years is a long time. Amanda
Yeah.
Ribas beat Mackenzie Dern 5 years ago. This fight, a completely different fight. We saw a completely reinvigorated Mackenzie Dern. The same thing is a possibility for this weekend with Arman Tsarukyan.
Yeah, I always love when there's a rematch because I think it's fascinating to see two guys who have, especially when there's grappling. I don't know what it, maybe that's just because I like watching grappling, but when guys have actually had hands on each other before, it always adds a layer of interest to me. But I agree with you that both of them, so much time has elapsed, and both of them have grown in their respective journeys so much that it almost, it's not that it doesn't matter at all. It was interesting in that it was as competitive as it was. I chalk that up though a bit to Islam Makhachev being like, "Who's this guy? Like, how's this gonna?" I'm sure he didn't quite have that level of attitude, but there had to be a bit of a 3 weeks notice. Really, there's no way that this guy's gonna be able to keep up with me, and he did a little bit. It was a if you take all those asterisks, those X factors out of it, it was a dominant win for Islam. It's not like Arman had big moments of controlling the fight or almost looking to finish Islam. It's not like that's what happened at all. But the scrambles were very competitive and interesting. And that is the one thing I feel like can probably be transported from that fight into the fight that we're looking for this weekend.
Well, there's a lot of things to take away from that fight. The one thing that we know that Arman can scramble with him. So here's the thing about a guy like Islam is that when he scrambles and he gets into a dominant position, he's so good and he's such a good grappler that when he puts you in a hole, it's almost impossible to get out of.
Mm-hmm.
And his previous opponents recognize that. Like when he fought, Bobby Green or even Dustin, like Dustin struggled to get out of positions, which was why it was a moral victory when Dustin did get out of positions. But Arman can scramble with him. Now, the good news is that a lot of Islam's tricks are out there. We've seen him. He's got a lot of information on him now. A lot of the things that he does in order to gain advantages over opponents, like the little leg drag he did on Dustin Poirier, and even with Arman Tsarukyan the first time, the little trip to the mount. Like, yeah, those things are the rabbit is out the hat. Now, if Arman can prepare for those things, and he already knows he can scramble with him, if he could just neutralize those tricks and avoid those tricks, he already knows he can scramble with him on a regular basis in the fight. So I think those are advantages that Arman can use for himself in order to win.
All right, before we go too much further, though, let's take a look at some of the stats for this fight. Of course, we have Islam Makhachev, the champion, 15-1 in the UFC, 3 knockouts, 7 submissions, 5 decisions, and Arman Tsarukyan, 9-2 in the UFC, 4 knockouts and 5 decisions. Islam is 5'10", while Arman Tsarukyan is 5'7". Interestingly, Arman actually has a 2-inch reach advantage. Don't know that that's going to be enough to make a huge difference. Of course, Islam being a southpaw, that could be an interesting factor in this fight. And then Islam 33 to Arman's 28. Now, in the stats overview, there's some interesting ones that jump off the page. The first one to me is the striking accuracy number. Islam Makhachev's striking accuracy is 59.6%, which is crazy high. The UFC average is 42%. Arman is 48.9%, so it's still well above the average, but 59.6 is just ludicrous in terms of accuracy. He's so efficient, so surgical in the way that he approaches things. And then when you get to the takedown defense, this is interesting. Islam has a 90.9% takedown defense rate, and Arman has a 75% takedown defense rate. Islam averages 1.06 submission attempts per 15 minutes, and Arman has 0. He's not really a submission threat necessarily. Islam has 4 knockdowns and has been knocked down twice. Arman has 3 knockdowns and has never been knocked down, and he has a lot fewer fights. I think that's a really interesting stat when I saw that one. And just to give you some context about the takedown numbers, so Islam averages 3.19 takedowns per 15 minutes. He has been taken down twice. Once was by Arman Tsarukyan, and the other one was by Thiago Moises. And then for Arman Tsarukyan, he averages 3.25 takedowns per 15 minutes, but he has been taken down 10 times and he has been attempted to be taken down 40 times, whereas someone has tried to take him down 22 times and only succeeded 2 of those times. So I always like to kind of dig into the actual numbers that make up the percentage, because percentages can be wildly, I don't know, misrepresentative if you don't understand the numbers that went into them.
Yeah, that's interesting because when you talked about Arman's takedown defense, it's relatively low
It is relatively low.
for a
I
good
think
as
the
good of a
Gamrot
wrestler
fight
he
had
is.
a lot to do with that.
Yeah, like Gamrot. Well, if you think about it, if he's been taken down 10 times, Gamrot took him down what 6 times,
Yeah.
and the other 4 times he got taken down probably was by Islam in their first fight.
Yes, it
So
probably was.
yeah,
I
so I
didn't
mean
check
it's
that.
it's a bit misleading,
Yeah.
but it's a high number in terms of how many times it's been taken down. But very few guys have taken him down.
Yes, yes. And it is interesting that one of 2 people who've taken Islam down, one is Arman himself. So it's it always speaks to how good someone is at something when you're like, yeah, but this one guy did it to him one time. Isn't that impressive?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah, I mean,
it's
that
like the
doesn't
Floyd
make sense.
Mayweather video where it's like
Yeah.
Floyd Mayweather gets hit and they made a YouTube video about him getting hit once out of 50 fights. Yeah.
Yeah, that's you're grasping at straws, but guys, that's our job. We're here to talk about the numbers and the possibilities. It's crazy when someone is that good that you have to start, talking about, oh, this happened this one time. Let's talk about that. But yeah, a lot of good things in terms of what we have to look forward to in this fight. This is certainly, to me, I love this matchup for, I mean, a number of obvious reasons, but we don't always get the true number one contender and the true toughest fight in the division against the champion. Sometimes it's the number one contender, but we're like, yeah, this is a tough matchup or not a tough matchup for the champ, or whatever the case may be. It's not always the case that it is truly the number one and truly the toughest fight at the moment that can be made, and I love that about this fight. Islam is looking for his 4th consecutive title defense, and that would put him at the top of the leaderboard in terms of all-time title defenses in this division. He would surpass Khabib, he would surpass BJ Penn, and he would surpass Benson Henderson and become the person with the most consecutive title defenses. I feel like I get accused of not giving Islam his flowers often enough. So I hope that this video can undo some of that, because the case has never been that I don't appreciate Islam as a champion or his skill set. I think Islam is incredible. And as I was studying for this particular matchup, I think I gained an even greater appreciation for just how good he is, and the fact that he is on the precipice of being maybe, I don't think he's quite at the point of surpassing Khabib for greatest lightweight of all time, but he's damn close.
Well, he's got his work cut out for him, and it's hard to kind of get out of that shadow of Khabib, right? I think that's the biggest thing, is that Khabib has cast this big enough shadow that's very difficult for him to get out. But I will say this, though, to your point, in terms of the number one guy plus the toughest matchup, the last time we saw that was at UFC Noche with Marab being the toughest matchup, the number one contender,
Yeah.
and the toughest matchup for Sean O'Malley, and he absolutely destroyed Sean O'Malley. So this could be a very dangerous situation for Islam, because yes, he is fighting the toughest guy and the number one contender. So if he can pass this test, the problem is Tsarukyan just doesn't have the name value that people recognize to say, okay, he's the greatest. I mean, four wins at 4 title defenses at lightweight, what a remarkable feat that is. But unfortunately, Arman Tsarukyan doesn't have the name value for him to really kind of solidify that status of
Yeah.
greatest lightweight of all time.
There were so many things that Khabib did and accomplished and embodied, some of them that you can't control. Like the fact that he had this ultimate foe, this ultimate rivalry in Conor McGregor. That is not within your control
Right.
to have a foe come along at the perfect time, create this perfect storm of, the world knowing who you are. You can work as hard as you want. You can't control when or if that even ever happens. So there is, in some ways, it kind of stinks because there's parts of this that are a little bit outside of his control. You know, I don't
A
know
lot
how
of it.
much. What's that?
That you're right. A lot of it, like all
Yeah.
that's out of his control.
And I don't know how much perfection plays a role, but I do think it plays a role. I don't know that that's fair, you know, but having a loss, and it wasn't quite like a John Jones loss where we're all like, yeah, but that didn't really happen. He really did get knocked out. It's just a blip on the radar, and most people probably couldn't even tell you. I know you know who it was against, but a lot of the casual fan couldn't even tell you who knocked him out, right?
Hmm.
It was not a big factor in his career, but it is a thing. It's a number. There's a
You
number
know,
in that column.
see again, but that's out of his control too, because
Yeah.
a different ref wouldn't have stopped that fight.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
A different ref,
Right.
different ref, because he was still like he went down and then he went down for sure, was
Yeah.
out, but was bringing himself back
The
together.
ref
But the
from the
ref,
Santiago Ponzinibbio fight would not have stopped it.
no, exactly. A different ref
That
lets
was,
that
but
fight go a little bit longer and see, and we see what happens. And we have a completely different narrative about him because that one loss, he probably doesn't get that one loss. But you're right. All these things that are plaguing him as a champion are out of his control. That's the crazy part about MMA is that your career is not really in your control when you think about all these different factors.
but the fact still remains that on paper, he's doing some incredible record-breaking type things, and that may not put him in the same category to the casual fan, but at some point he's going to do enough on paper where he has to be mentioned in the same conversation. It's just kind of a fun thing to figure out what it's going to take to get him to be on the same level of Khabib or if he can't, because some of those things are out of his control. I don't know fully what the answer is. I think there's enough he can do. I think if he beats more legit big name lightweights, I don't know that the 2 wins over Volk are enough to like really count for some incredible string at lightweight. I would love to see him get a string of big title defenses at lightweight, specifically against lightweight guys, and then maybe go up to 170. And I realize that doesn't affect what your GOAT status is at lightweight, but you get my point.
But it would help. It would help tremendously.
Yeah.
Because part of the reason why we consider BJ Penn, I consider BJ Penn the greatest lightweight of all time, is because he did go up to 170 and beat Matt Hughes. So that part of that can definitely help his case as being the greatest lightweight of all time. But again, but if he were to go up to 170 and beat Bilal Muhammad, I mean, to me that would warrant it. But it's just the name value. Like when in 10 years from now, when you look back at the names that he's beaten, you're going to be like,
But you can kind of say that about Khabib as well, other than his last two.
for sure. You should be able to, but Khabib has just created this mystique about him that he created those, like he made those names bigger.
Yeah.
Just because they fought him.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it has to do, and this is something that Islam just, again, out of his control. He can't be this. He will never be first. Khabib was the first to create this mold of what a scary, Dagestani, devastating wrestler operates like, and what they can do in terms of laying waste to the greater part of a division. It was a new thing, a new style of fighter, a new style of presenting yourself on the mic, you know, as in terms of like not really saying a whole lot. There's just a lot there that Islam will never be first. So I don't know. I think it'll take a little extra for him on paper, but I do think he can be there. I've just probably spent way too much time on this one interesting question, but to the fight itself, and I don't normally approach videos this way, but for some reason I feel like it this time. I look at this fight and I do think that they are very close, but everywhere I look, I just see Islam one click ahead of Arman in terms of the wrestling, in terms of the clinch, in terms of the fight IQ. I think Arman has a tremendous kicking game. And he's one of only 2 people to ever take Islam down. So clearly the man can wrestle offensively against Islam, but is that the right path to victory for Tsarukyan?
Honestly, I don't know what the right path of victory.
I don't either.
I don't really think there is a legit right path for him. It's he has to have, I don't want to say divine intervention, but he has to fight a fight in which it's extremely active and at some level hope to catch Islam somewhere in the process of his activity. Because you're right, he's behind. If Islam is a 10 on all the aspects of fighting, Arman is a 9 on all the aspects of fighting. He's a step behind on everything. But that doesn't mean he can't catch him somewhere in the process of this.
Of
Because
course.
as we know, all it takes is one shot to change the course of the fight. If I'm Arman, like you said, his kicking game is probably the one thing that he's a little bit better, but which is negated by Islam's his ability to judge distance and
Why would you
awareness.
kick
Like,
a wrestler?
yeah.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, if I'm Arman, a highly active fight and hope to catch him somewhere in the process of that. And it's very possible. Very possible. Just we're gonna scrap and scrap and scrap because Islam doesn't take a lot of chances. So I would scrap with him
Mhm.
and try to catch him in the process of all that.
Yeah, that is one of the things that really jumps out is just how efficient and how what a high level of fight IQ he always operates with. So to disrupt that, you have to kind of make it a little bit scrappy, a little bit messier against the guy who operates, like a machine out there, if you will let him do that. Has anyone really challenged Islam in the grappling? I mean, I know Alex Volkanovski had some interesting defense. Uh, again, sometimes you you think back on the narratives of certain fights, and it's like, yeah, but that was really just more of a moral victory. Like he didn't get run over, you know. Same thing with Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier defended some takedowns, and like they had some really good boxing exchanges, but by and large, that was Islam's fight.
It's the Nelson Mandela effect. You know this thing where it's like we remember something differently than it actually is. It's like we remember these fights as being closer than they actually were because of the moral victory that these guys had. Like if it wasn't Dustin Poirier and him being able to escape we would have been, if it was somebody else, we'd be like, oh yeah, Islam just beat this guy up. Because he dominated the whole fight. Like Dustin didn't, I don't know if he won a round. He had some decent moments, but I don't think
He
he won a round.
did on the scorecards, oddly enough. I had the exact same question because in my mind, he didn't.
Right.
Went back, I rewatched the fight. I looked at the scorecards. Frankly, I don't agree with the scorecards, but they actually had it was 2-2 going into the fifth. Isn't that crazy?
Really? 2-2 going into the
Yes.
I don't remember it being that close.
I don't either.
I just remember being happy for Dustin that he was keeping it competitive.
I don't think it was that close, to be honest with you. I rewatched it. It was either today or yesterday, and I remember being like, that was kind of some weird judging. But anyway, it was not overly that again, there was not a moment that you could hang your hat on like, oh man, Dustin almost had him there. There were a couple little exchanges where he'd crack him a bit, but by and large, Islam was controlling him. So I guess my question is, no one has really challenged his wrestling in the way that Arman can, but can Arman challenge his wrestling to the degree that we're kind of starting to spin the story that way?
I think so. I
You think
think that
so?
for sure he can. He's got to be very obviously he has time he had time to prepare for it. I mean, think about that. Like if he was competitive enough on a week's notice 5 years ago,
Yeah,
he's had a lot of time to prepare for this moment.
I agree. Here's the only other thing that I'll say, because I was going down that same line of thought, and then I was like, I'm going to rewatch the Gamrot fight, and I'm going to look at the stats from the Gamrot fight, which was another crazy fight with tons of great scrambles. He landed one takedown to Gamrot six, and I just don't know you can do that to Islam with Islam.
Well, Gamrot's a little busier than
Yeah,
Sarukian. And if I'm Sarukian, I'm using that as a blueprint. Again, being messy like Gamrot, using that as kind of a blueprint because one thing that we know about Islam too is that when he gets in a bit of trouble, he starts to struggle a little bit in terms of his confidence and his output. Like he starts to fade a little bit and go, all right, I just need to get to some positions to stall this out so I can catch my breath. If I'm Arman, I know this, and I'm trying to create as many moments like that as possible to get Islam to slow down a little bit so that later in the rounds I can start to maybe catch him with that one big shot that I need.
Do you feel like that's why Armand looks so absolutely jacked out of his mind right now? Because the focus has been on, I have to have my fitness at this insane level because I got to be able to push this guy and make him uncomfortable. Do you think that's what we're seeing? Or
Well,
is he,
everybody's been talking about that, like how jacked he is. I mean, I don't
don't
know.
pretend like you haven't seen it.
No,
Don't
I
pretend
no,
like
it's
you
not
didn't go,
that.
oh my God, that
It's
man
not
looks
that.
so.
I'm just like, yo, how do you get, how are you a professional and then all of a sudden you get a title shot and then you end up this jacked? Like, what have you done in the last couple of months that got you like this for the title shot?
You got a title shot, and now you're like, this is it.
But what was he doing before? He was chilling. He was eating cookies. I
I'm
don't
not,
know.
no, no.
I'm not, listen. I'm not accusing the man of anything. I'm just saying it's just peculiar that now all of a sudden he's this jacked.
I think it's the effect of like this is my mom's spaghetti moment. Well, I got one shot to make this happen. It'll get you to
And
push
no,
that
one
extra.
shot, no pun intended.
Yes. Uh, do you remember Armand's fight with Charles Oliveira? I mean, obviously it wasn't that long ago. It was back in
Yeah.
April. Have you
Mhm.
watched that recently enough to remember it?
I remember watching it when it happened. I was pretty in tune with it.
When I rewatched it, I'm not sure I thought he won. I don't know if you remember it closely enough to remember.
No, so I remember this, and I'm very biased towards
Charles?
bottom guys. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
the bottom guy, and I'm very biased towards that. And I agree with you. I agree with you. Um, there were moments in there where you just kind of gave Arman the nod because he's on top, but doesn't necessarily mean he was winning. And so sometimes when people go, "Who you think won?" It's not who I think won. It's who I think the judges are going to say
Yeah.
won.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's really what it comes down to sometimes. I don't think he won, but I know the judges are going to say that he won. And I think that might have been a situation with the Armand fight. But
Yeah.
that's a completely different stylistic situation with Charles Oliveira, and because Charles Oliveira will go to his back and be aggressive.
Yeah.
I can't imagine Islam doing that.
How do you think this fight's actually going to play out? Like, what do you think it's going to look like?
Honestly, with saying all this and trying to pump Armand up, I think it still looks similar to the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still think it looks similar to the first one. And I was wrong over the weekend about Mackenzie and Amanda Hebos. I thought that might look similar to the first one, but I think this is a little different situation because the Mackenzie fight, Mackenzie seemed a lot more motivated
Hmm.
compared to the first time. Armand doesn't necessarily seem a lot more. He might be more jacked, but in terms of mentally, he doesn't seem more motivated. Like he's hungry to be like, yo, I'm getting this win back. Not just get the title, but I need to get this win back. And I need to prove that there's somebody who can crack this Dagestani code.
Don't you think that's kind of just a cultural respect thing? Because I do think, I mean, I know that he was a great admirer of Khabib and of Islam and of Abdulmanap. And I wonder if his lack of like putting himself out there and saying, no, I'm better in the wrestling. I'm a better striker. I'm going to get that. Like he just hasn't been saying a whole lot in that regard. And maybe that'll change this week because we're filming this before the press conference. I wonder if that's just more of a out of respect. I'm not going to like, I don't know, say those things out loud.
Well, it's got to be kind of tough for those guys in that region
Yeah.
because you have to imagine that the Khabib team, that's the team over there.
It's
Like if you
revered and it
for
should,
sure,
yeah.
there's a lot of teams over in that region, but that's the team. That's the Militich fighting systems of the early 2000s. Like that's the squad.
Yeah.
And if you weren't a part of that at some level, you kind of was like, yo, how do I get down with them?
Hmm.
But you never got down with them. Now you fighting them. So you got to put that behind you and go, there's no hero worship here. I'm going after this guy's throat. And that's what he has to do. And he might not be the type to verbalize that. And that may work for him. So we just have to find out, like, is it going to work for him not to verbalize it? Because he hasn't verbalized it.
Yeah.
I would. I'd be like, yo, give me this guy. Yo, I'm going for blood.
Do you think this fight, how much of this fight, put a percentage on it, how much of this fight is striking, how much of this fight is wrestling? Is it
I think that, I think
50-50,
I
constantly
think
change, like shifting?
I think it's going to be more striking than anything.
Yeah.
I think at some point, once they realize that neither of them are going to be able to maintain a strong, solid position on the ground, then it's going to be a lot of just striking and trying to get advantages on the feet that way. But I do think that Arman will get edged out every round by some sort of grappling exchange. May not be all the way to the ground, but some sort of grappling exchange, just because of the IQ of Islam. I think that Islam just knows when to pull the trigger on grappling and when to pull off a little bit and just when to attack in certain areas. And that's just really such a skill set that gets overlooked. And that is, when am I going to do this? When am I going to do that? And I think that Islam is a little bit better than Arman in those areas, and probably a little bit a better temperament for that as well too.
Mhm.
Arman might get a little frustrated at times and start making mistakes.
Well, and that comes down to the high level experience too for Islam as well. Do you see a finish here, or do you think this is going to be a decision?
No, I don't see a finish here. The only way I see a finish here really, there's two ways to finish. So if I'm a betting man, I don't know what the odds are on Arman by knockout,
I don't have
but
it, yeah.
yeah, and I would they're probably pretty good odds on that. And to me that's a possibility because Arman can catch him. Like, just catch him. He just caught him.
Like you did with Benil.
Yeah, like he did with Benil. He need him in the face and punched him, right? So like that's a moment that's a realistic possibility, not a high one, but if it's going to happen, I see Arman doing that, or Arman giving up. Like, again, like once you've had this hero worship of these guys for so long, like if you're getting dominated, you're in the fifth round and you're getting dominated, there's an opportunity for Arman to just give up and Islam to finish him. So
Submission.
submission, yeah.
Yeah. I can't wait to see this fight. I think it's a fascinating chess match. It's going to be good.
I mean, it really is. It's really. I mean, if we thought Gamrot and Tsarukyan was good, I mean, this is going to be
Yeah,
better than
yeah,
that.
I
Like,
agree.
to me, on paper, this is better than that.
I agree. I agree. And I'm excited to see what each of them has to say this week as we get closer and closer to fight night. Dean, I always appreciate your insights. Thank you very much for your time, as always. And guys, we appreciate you watching the channel. Please click like, please click subscribe. We appreciate it so much. Lots more videos to check out on this channel. We have a co-main event breakdown as well coming out. So check it out. We'll see you there.